The moment the judge burst into uncontrollable laughter in open court was when the HOA attorney dramatically unveiled a foam board display featuring Lego trees and a full Barbie dream house to demonstrate how Gregory's illegally tall home supposedly blocked Mrs. Pendleton's sunset meditation. Judge Rollins, an 82-year-old with the gavel shaped like a trout, leaned forward, eyebrows lifted, and asked with genuine disbelief, "Does the HOA regularly submit Mattel-based evidence?" I didn't say a single word. I just sipped my iced tea and let the ridiculousness speak for itself. The attorney's face turned 3 different shades of red as he tried to insist the model was to scale, while Joan Pendleton nodded vigorously beside him, her giant, wide-brimmed hat bobbing like a sailboat fighting rough water. "My name is Gregory Beck, a retired mechanical engineer who finally built his dream home on the far edge of Sycamore Bluffs, a quiet, HOA-governed neighborhood in central Colorado. The property wasn't even technically inside the HOA's boundary. I confirmed it twice, once through the county assessor's office and again with a private surveyor. But that didn't stop the HOA from acting like I had constructed a rogue nation at their doorstep, and at the helm of that self-appointed empire stood Joan Pendleton, a former cruise director turned suburban dictator, who ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a pastel gardening glove. Joan was notorious throughout the community for her oversized hats, her daily Chardonnay-fueled neighborhood wine walks, and her talent for creatively interpreting bylaws in ways that mysteriously always benefited her. Her most sacred commandment, which she recited at every HOA meeting, was simple: "My sunset view is sacred." She'd say it as though the words had been etched onto stone tablets by Moses himself. So when my modern two-story home went up just 100 feet away, but naturally 12 feet higher due to the elevation, she declared it a visual blockade and a personal attack on her evening peace. The chaos started small, as these things often do. First came official letters stamped with the HOA seal, warning me of implied HOA airspace intrusion, whatever that was supposed to mean. Then community flyers began appearing on everyone's doorsteps, titled, "Say No to Skyline Saboteurs," complete with a grainy picture of my home, aggressively circled in red marker. One morning, I found a plastic flamingo lawn ornament jammed straight through my mailbox, its tiny plastic eyes glaring up at me accusingly. Joan denied being involved, but I'd seen a whole flock of the same flamingos lining her garden path. Next came something she called the Sunset Recon Committee, which in reality was just 3 HOA volunteers armed with binoculars, clipboards, and folding chairs. They stationed themselves on Joan's patio every day from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m., studying the shadow patterns my house cast as if they were planning a lunar expedition. One of them, Harold, even brought a sextant. Then Joan launched a petition titled Save Our Sky, abbreviated SOS, naturally, and mailed it to every resident. Each envelope included a free herbal tea sample and an invitation to what she dramatically called a view-affirming vigil. The vigil was an experience. About 30 people attended, most drawn by sheer curiosity and free snacks. Joan had everyone hold candles while she recited a poem she'd written about the holiness of horizons. She actually teared up during the line, claiming sunsets were nature's way of saying goodnight. I watched from my new deck, trying not to laugh as she dramatically pointed at my house at the emotional climax. That's when I realized she was genuinely committed to escalating this absurd war. Things intensified again when Joan hired what she proudly introduced as a light consultant. In reality, it was just her nephew, a guy with a physics degree who needed quick cash. He showed up with all sorts of equipment, measuring lumens and mapping shadow trajectories like he was working on a project for NASA. He produced a 30-page report, which Joan immediately had spiral-bound and delivered to every house in the HOA. The report claimed my house caused a phenomenon called sunset shadowing, supposedly lowering property values by up to 15%. She conveniently neglected to mention that her nephew's degree was in theoretical particle physics, which had absolutely nothing to do with real estate or architecture. Then Joan launched a social media crusade on the neighborhood Facebook page, posting daily photos of her compromised sunset with dramatic captions like, "Another evening stolen," and "Darkness where light should be." She tagged me in every single post, even though I didn't even have Facebook. My neighbor Stan would text me screenshots, and we'd end up laughing about it over our morning coffee. The comment section quickly turned into a battlefield, with Joan's loyalists mostly 3 wine moms who did everything as a unit on one side, and residents who thought she had completely lost it on the other. Then, finally, she escalated things to the inevitable. She filed a lawsuit, Pendleton versus Beck et al., accusing me of causing psychological distress and my personal favorite vitamin D disruption due to visual obstruction. When I got served the papers, I had to read them 3 separate times just to make sure it wasn't an elaborate joke. But no, she was genuinely suing me for blocking her vitamin D, as if the sun existed only in the exact slice of sky my house allegedly interfered with. Her attorney even attached a medical note from her holistic wellness coach about how uninterrupted sunset exposure was essential for chakra alignment. In court, Joan's lawyer, a sweaty man named Gerald who looked like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else, tried to argue that the HOA had historical dominion over the aesthetic experience of adjacent territories. He said those words out loud, with a straight face. Judge Rollins, who had been on the bench for 4 decades and thought he'd seen everything, looked dangerously close to smirking as Gerald pulled out the foam board topped with Lego trees. "This demonstrates," Gerald said in a trembling voice, "the egregious visual impediment created by the defendant's structure." My attorney, a razor-sharp woman named Sarah Chen, calmly rose and laid out 3 devastating points. First, my property was not part of the HOA. We had certified records from the county proving it. Second, HOA bylaws do not magically extend beyond their official borders, no matter how fiercely Joan wished they did. Third, there was absolutely zero legal precedent for sunset supremacy in the entire documented history of American jurisprudence. She delivered that last line while locking eyes directly with Joan, who was furiously scribbling on a notepad and whispering urgent nonsense at Gerald. Then Sarah delivered the twist that absolutely nobody saw coming. She had brought a veteran surveyor, Tom Martinez, who had spent 20 years measuring properties across the region. Tom testified that Joan's house was actually 6 feet taller than mine. She had simply built on lower terrain. He presented measurements, diagrams, and a full spread of documentation. In other words, from certain angles, especially from the north side, where several HOA homes were located, Joan's own house was the single largest view blocker in the entire neighborhood. Judge Rollins let out a wheeze so loud it echoed off the walls, then burst into full-blown laughter, the kind where you need to take off your glasses and wipe your eyes. His ruling was swift and absolutely merciless. The HOA had zero legal authority over my property. The lawsuit, he declared, was, and he said this verbatim, a frivolous display of aesthetic authoritarianism. He ordered Joan to pay all my legal fees. The total, $32,000. When he announced the number, Joan's face cycled from red to pale to a strange greenish shade I didn't know was physically possible. She leapt to her feet so fast her hat toppled off, shouting about injustice and threatening to take her case to the Supreme Court if necessary. Gerald silently packed away his Lego display, utterly defeated. A soft, polite wave of applause rippled through the courtroom from the handful of neighbors who'd shown up. I gave a small, modest bow, doing my best not to look smug, though inside, victory tasted sweet. Joan stormed out of the room, muttering angrily about solar rights and spiritual energy zones, her heels clacking furiously on the marble. The best moment came when she attempted to slam the courtroom door for dramatic effect, only to discover it had one of those slow close hinges. Instead of a satisfying slam, it gently whispered shut while everyone watched. The true end of Joan's reign arrived when I hosted a neighborhood cookout I called Barbecue and Blocked Views. I set up reclining chairs all over my yard, handed out sun hats, and even erected cardboard cutouts of Joan's house at various angles, each labeled with signs saying, "This is the real problem. with arrows pointing toward her oversized colonial giant. Guests received commemorative t-shirts reading, "I survived the sunset lawsuit," complete with the cartoonish sun being blocked by a house. I livestreamed the entire sunset that night in crisp 4000 with soft jazz playing in the background. The stream went mildly viral under hashtag HOA Hysteria, pulling in around 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from people sharing their own HOA nightmare stories. Someone even turned Joan's stiff-faced photo from the local paper into a meme labeled, "Karen demands to speak to the Sun's manager." Local news stations picked up the story, and soon Joan became a regional symbol of HOA overreach. She was quietly voted off the HOA board 3 months later after trying to pass a new bylaw banning reflective windows and oversized clouds. The vote was unanimous except for Joan, who accused everyone of conspiracy and weather manipulation. These days, she hosts solo sunset meditations in her backyard, facing a mirror. She angled just right to reflect the view. She claimed she'd lost. Everyone knows she never really lost anything except control. As for me, I installed a retractable second floor deck that I jokingly call the Pendleton platform. I watch sunsets from there with friends, serving cocktails with names like Cornetta and Bylaw Breeze. The $32,000 she paid covered the deck installation and still left enough for a top-tier telescope, which I sometimes aim at the sunset, purely for symbolic effect, whenever I notice her peering out from her window.